I want to welcome everyone to the Unitarian Church of Los Alamos. Whoever you are, wherever you are in your life's journey, you're welcome here. My name is James Carroll. This is our adult religion, comparative religion class. It's the fifth in a series on Hinduism, and we're going to break it into two parts. The first part is going to be on caste and gender, which is what we're doing now. I want to remind everyone of the course webpage. The URL is sites.google.com/view/comparative religion. And if you go there, there should be lots of links to the different lectures that we've done, and hopefully some extra reading and things like that, and you'll find that useful. So today, or last time, lecture 4, we talked about sex, sexuality, the divine feminine, and the idea of the female goddess in Hinduism. And so that was that we did last time. Today we're going to try to finish with Hinduism, which is kind of sad. We do these once a month, so it's been almost half a year that we've been working on Hinduism, and I've learned all sorts of things and really enjoyed it. And it's going to be sad to move on, but I'm sure we'll enjoy the next thing we do too. So we have to move on in order to get to the next thing. But to conclude, we're going to talk about caste and gender, because that's an important issue in modern Hinduism today. And then we're going to break, and then we'll come back and talk about the way Hinduism has reacted to the cultural context in which it's been placed in modernity. So we'll talk about the Islamic conquest and the reaction of Hinduism to Islam, the British occupation, and other elements of modernity like the Enlightenment, science, reason, globalization, and then Hinduism. Then we'll talk about how Hinduism has influenced and is beginning to grow in the West. So that's the outline for what we'll talk about. As always, these are my favorite two reference resources for Hinduism. God is Not One, the 8 Rival Religions That Run the World, and Why Their Differences Matter by Stephen Prothero. He has 2 chapters on Hinduism that are a really good introduction because they're short. 2 chapters, and he'll give you a good overview. And then if you want to learn more, Great Courses has an entire lecture series by Mark Musi that I am indebted to for a lot of my material, which is very good. I recommend everyone go and listen to that if they want to know even more. And I've got a lot of my material from here, but obviously he talks about a lot more than I do, has a lot more time. So let's dive into the concepts of caste and gender. We talked about caste in the doctrinal dimension and what it meant earlier. So when we talked about the Vedas, we mentioned that there's this passage about the dismemberment of the primeval man, the Parishi, and that from his mouth came the Brahmins, the Kshatriyas from his shoulders and his thighs and his feet. And each of those castes came from that. So there's some concept of the stratified society that goes all the way back to the early Vedic texts. But this is the concept of caste in India, that there is a group that you were born into that has very specific roles. For example, the Brahmins are the priests, the scholars, the teachers. The Kshatriyas are the rulers, the warriors, the administrators. It's interesting that they put their teachers ahead of their kings. But the kings are in the Kshatriyas caste. The Vaishyavas are the agriculturalists, the merchants, the people who raise cattle and sell and buy. And the Shudras are the laborers, the peasants, the farmers, etc. The service providers, etc. So there are 2 concepts associated with caste, Varna and Jati. That means caste and subcaste. So each caste is divided into subcastes. And those subcastes are local, so the organization of caste is global across all of India and Hinduism, but the subcastes are not. And so in one location you might see a different set of subcastes than in another, and their pecking order is also different place to place. And so the Jatis will often vie for position. By performing their duty well, they can elevate their position ahead of the other Jatis surrounding them. So I think maybe one way to consider this is to think of them as the Jatis as almost a guild. These are local guilds associated with each different trade and work. Like, so there'll be a Jati for the net makers, and there'll be a Jati for the saddle makers and this sort of thing. So let's talk about, this is called the Laws of Manu. The Laws of Manu is not the only text like this. There's a whole bunch of texts that are purported to lay down the rules of the caste. In other words, if you belong to a caste, what is your job? And the Laws of Manu will tell you. And there are a whole bunch of texts like this, but the Laws of Manu are especially important because they were used to formulate Hindu law by the colonial British government. And so this particular text was influential. It's dated to the 2nd to the 3rd century, although we're not sure how accurate some of those dates are. 2nd century BCE to the 3rd century CE. It purports to be a discourse given by a guy named Manu and this other guy who I don't, Bringu, something like that. And the topics discuss things like the duties, rights, laws, conduct, virtues, etc. for society in general and for the different castes. So it'll lay out the job of each of the caste members, but it will also talk about general concepts that everyone should deal with. It speaks mostly to the top 3 castes. It seems to have been written for them and speaks a lot less of the other castes. So this was an influential text, and so we need to have some concept of what's in it and how it influences things. So how authoritative is it? How authoritative do Hindus view it? And also how accurate is it? This is from Mahatma Gandhi, which his commentary on the Laws of Manu, and we'll talk about him more in a bit. But obviously he opposed the concept of the outcasts and some of the structures of the caste system. And so this is his commentary on the book in which the caste system is laid out in a way that was adopted by colonial law. So it's very interesting. He says he holds the Manu Smriti. Smriti is the writings. That's one category of Hindu scripture. So he says, I hold the Manu Smriti as part of the Shastras, meaning he thinks it's authoritative, but that does not mean that I swear by every verse that is printed in the book described as the Manu Smriti. There are so many contradictions in the printed volume that if you accept one part, you are bound to reject those parts that pass wholly inconsistent with it, and nobody is in possession of the original text. So he questions whether we actually have what Manu said, and even if we do, it's contradictory, and so you have to pick and choose. I think that sounds familiar to people who were dealing with biblical texts that also seemed to them to contradict each other, and they were trying to decide how they would, and we don't have the originals, and we have these copies of copies. And so this is what allowed him to say, I accept this part of the Laws of Manu, and I reject this part, and it needs to be reformed. And so this is the reformer's view of the authority of the Laws of Manu. This is what it has to say about doing your duty. It says it's better to discharge one's own appointed duty, in this case dharma, and it's referring specifically to the dharma of your caste. So each caste has its own unique duty. Each stage in your life has a unique duty. We'll talk about life stages, we'll talk about gender duties, we'll talk about caste duties. All those things are incorporated in this concept of dharma. And it's better to discharge your own dharma incompletely than to perform completely the dharma of another. For he who lives according to the law of another caste is instantly excluded from his own. So this gives you the idea of why the caste system has the pervasive grip on the people that it does. Because it's tied to your own order and duty. Speaking to the kings, it says that the king, this is another aspect that I find interesting, is its view of punishment, the importance of punishment. So speaking to the king in terms of his duty, it says that the king did not, without tiring, inflict punishment on those worthy to be punished. The stronger would roast the weaker, like fish on a spit. The whole world is kept in order by punishment. For a guiltless man is hard to find. Through fear of punishment, the whole world yields enjoyments. Now, this view is very different from mine because I believe that most people are good. And I don't think we need to scare people with punishments to make them be good. I think we need to just encourage us to love each other, and that will happen. However, there really are evil people in the world, and sometimes we need rules and laws to separate those people from the rest of us to keep us safe. And in terms of my stance on this, I feel like the first half I kind of agree with. You need laws, and you need to separate the truly evil from us. And then when he says most of us, need that, or we would fail, reminds me of the way some fundamentalist Christians will talk to atheists and say, if you don't believe that God will punish the wicked, why are you good? Which makes me wonder, why are you good? And worry about, if that's the only thing that makes you a good person, that's kind of scary. Most of us are good people because we care about other people, and we're decent human beings. So this is the law, but it sets out this concept of what the world is like, and canonizes it in a book with some measure of authority in the Hindu tradition that says that view of humanity is true, that we need punishments to keep us in line, and the majority of us actually need that, which is the one part that I kind of would worry about. Speaking to the Shudra caste, these are the lowest caste, it says their job is to serve the Brahmins. To serve the Brahmin is the highest duty of the Shudra. One who does this well attains in his next life a higher caste. A Shudra, though emancipated by his master, is not released from servitude, since that is innate in him, who can set him free from it. So this, again, sounds an awful lot like the sort of thing that was said about people of color in American slavery. The idea is that this is a group of people who are inherently duty-bound to service. Their job is service, and you can't release them even if you want to, because it's inherent in their nature. They were born that way, essentially, is what it's saying. And then we have the untouchables. Now, the untouchables are not mentioned in the Law of Manu at all, so their place in society isn't set forth in the text. The idea, of course, is that we use the term outcasts, and that means someone who has no caste. They're not just the lowest part of the caste system, they're actually outside of the caste system itself. They have no caste. And so, like I said, that's why they're not mentioned in the Law of Manu. In modern times, people have taken to calling them the Dalit, meaning the oppressed ones, and Gandhi liked to call them the Hirijan, which was roughly translated as the people of God. Because he was trying to point out that the social injustice imposed upon these people is wrong, and that they are actually the people of God, the oppressed ones, not the outcasts, not those without caste. They're the God cares about even the oppressed, is the idea that's being presented. So this system has been remarkably stable through generations and centuries of Hindu history and Indian history. And one of the obvious questions that someone from the West might have looking at this system is, why did it stay stable? Because it's clearly unfair in the sense that some people are treated better than others, and certain people have certain jobs, and those jobs are inherited. Why would a system of inherited jobs that's hierarchical, that treats some people better than others, remain stable for thousands of years? And there's certain aspects that keep it stable. The first is this concept of karma and purity. In other words, the reason people are born into a certain caste, according to the belief system, is because of their karma that they accumulated in the other life, in their previous lives, and that karma produces a certain level of purity. So the hierarchical level has to do with purity. The people at the top are ritually pure, the people at the bottom are ritually impure, and they do the jobs that are ritually polluting, so that the people at the top can stay ritually pure and perform the rituals that are necessary to bless all of society. So as a Brahmin, if I'm going to do this ritual, I need to be ritually pure or it won't work, and my ability to do this ritual blesses all of in Hindu and Indian society, so I need to remain ritually pure, so I'll stay pure, you'll do the impure work. In the West, we also have a hierarchical system, although it's based on wealth. How much money you can earn gives you a certain level of social prestige. A Hindu defending the caste system would say it makes more sense to have a system of hierarchy based on your ritual purity and your deserved karma than it does based on your undeserved wealth status and the luck in which you were able to earn certain amounts of money. So that would be the kind of intellectual defense of their system. Theirs is earned, ours is unearned. Ours is based on luck, theirs is based on what you deserve, and it's based on ritual purity instead of wealth. So they would claim it is internally, inherently just. They believe that it is the established cosmic order, and to violate it would violate cosmic order and produce social chaos. That belief is upheld by the fact that when it is violated, social chaos ensues in India, because of the caste system is the system of order in which their society is based. And when you disrupt it, social chaos does indeed ensue, and so that seems to be a self-reference, or fulfilling prophecy, yes. And of course, there is a mechanism of social mobility that is actually, if you believe the system, more probable to work than our system of social mobility. In other words, a poor person in the United States who is trapped in poverty cannot find a job, and if they can, they make very little money and they can't get out of poverty and they have lots of kids they have to support. That person might feel far more trapped in their situation than a person who is even an outcast in the Hindu system, who might believe that if they simply perform their dharma to the best of their ability, they will receive a superior rebirth and move through the castes in the next life. And also, because Hindu society has an emphasis on transcendence over material wealth and prosperity, there's some feeling that what matters in life isn't your material prosperity anyway. And so to some extent, the hierarchy doesn't matter. I should also point out that the hierarchy does not conform to wealth. There are often very poor people in high castes and very wealthy people in lower castes, and there are sometimes people who are in high castes who could make more money doing lower caste work. And when they do that, they are often socially berated for doing lower caste work that pays more because that's not their dharma. So this is the caste system in India. Of course, if you do not believe in the concepts of karma and ritual purity and rebirth, the system looks intensely unjust and with no chance of social mobility to our eyes. But within, from an internal perspective, it seems far more just than our system to the people who believe in it. So let's talk about the stages of life, and we'll talk about how that relates to the caste roles, but also gender roles. So we're going to start moving towards gender discussion. And we'll have something similar going on with gender. People are born into the gender they are because of the karma of their past life. So, what is the object of our pursuit? What's the object of life? To do your dharma, righteousness, moral values, duty, and the duties of your caste. Artha, prosperity, economic values. It's okay to seek prosperity for people of all castes. They can seek prosperity within their structured jobs. Kama, to seek pleasure, psychological values. This is the Kama Sutra. This is some of the things we discussed last class with regards to sex and sexuality, which is only one way to pursue Kama. And also moksha, liberation. Moksha is, of course, the ultimate goal. If you believe there are multiple goals in human life, and one is ultimate, how do you structure your life so that you pursue them all, if possible? And also, how do you structure society so that moksha and the pursuit of moksha does not overrule society and kind of cause everyone to run off and stop working and everyone starves to death because no one's harvesting the crops? So, in the Laws of Manu, he spells out very specific life stages. The first is the student stage. This happens when they are initiated, receive their new name and their cord and their that they will wear throughout their life, and they are reborn. These are the second born. So for those who are in the caste that are born again and have this ritual of second birth, from that moment on they become a student. They find a guru and they practice at the feet of the guru and learn the Vedas and the other things they might need to know to succeed in life. So there's the student stage. Then they enter household life when they are married. At this point, their job is to use what they have learned in their student stage to feed their family and to care for their wife and their children that they will produce. And their job is to produce children and contribute to society. Then they get to retire. And that is the stages of life that most people go through. There is a fourth stage for the people who feel particularly drawn to an attempt at moksha in this life. Because if you perform the first three stages well, you'll have a better reincarnation and you can try then to achieve moksha. But if you decide you want to try in this life, there is the stage of the sannyasin, the renouncer who gives up all their wealth, all their titles. They actually leave their caste. They are no longer bound by the dharma and the duties of their caste, and they beg. So they subsist by begging, and it's considered good karma to give to them and help them on their path. And their job is to give up attachment to all things in life so that they can achieve liberation from that which binds us to life and to rebirth. Those are the stages for a male. What happens to a female? So again, the Laws of Manu assume that the dharma for females is different than the dharma for males. So it is inherently different or discriminatory, if you want to use that term, between the male's jobs and stages in life and the female. The first is girlhood. In girlhood, a woman is assumed to not become a student. Education is not required for her and not expected. So she stays in girlhood, living with her parents. She is considered in her girlhood pure, but inauspicious. And what we mean by that is that she is ritually pure, depending on what she does and what caste she's in and all those things. But she has the non-ritual impurity we'll talk about in a minute. But she's inauspicious because she cannot produce children. Once she begins to menstruate, she is ready to enter the householder stage, which means women marry very young. As soon as they begin to menstruate, they're prepared for marriage, and people begin to look for an arranged marriage for them. At this point, their menstrual cycle makes them ritually impure, but they are considered now auspicious because they have the potential to produce children and to raise children. After their husband dies, they enter the third stage, which is widowhood, which in Hindu society can often be incredibly traumatic because, especially if the husband dies young, the woman is sometimes considered to be at fault, that something in her karma, she's bad luck, that sort of thing, led to her early husband's death, which makes remarriage difficult. This is what the Laws of Manu say about these three stages. Day and night, women must be kept dependent on the males of their families, and if they attach themselves to sensual enjoyments, they must be kept under one's control. Her father protects her in childhood, her husband protects her in youth, her sons protect her in old age. A woman is never fit for independence, he says. However, Hinduism has a tradition of people who explicitly buck that trend. One of the best examples is the Lal Ded. She is a poet from Kashmir. She has actually some very fascinating poems about wandering naked. There's actually a fun story about her where she would wander naked, and someone said, well, shouldn't you be clothed in the presence of men? And she says, there are no real men here. Yeah. And then apparently a man visited from another place, and she said, no, he is a real man, and she ran to hide herself because a worthy person had finally showed up in her town. So you get the impression that this woman was at least formidable. She wrote incredible poetry that's worth reading. Actually, I've read some of her stuff, and it's kind of fun. And this is the idea of almost a sannyasin. Remember, there are sannyasins who will often, intentionally flout social taboos. And what they're trying to do is say, these social structures are great for the householder stage, etc., but they keep us bound to karma. And so to free ourselves from karma, we will flout social taboos, including nudity. Men sannyasins will sometimes be nude. She is considered a sannyasin. So here we have a woman who was educated, literate, became a very impressive poet, and became a sannyasin and a religious figure, a guru, and teaching others and all sorts of things like that. This explains why the Hindus have a remarkable affection for Mother Teresa, because she, although she's not a Hindu, she fit their concept of the rare female who breaks out of the social life stages of a woman and becomes the religious female saint that they have a great affection for when they appear. They're simply considered rare. This also has apparently given them the ability to see certain women in positions of authority and still respect them. So, for example, we have the female Prime Minister of India, Indira Gandhi, so far only female Prime Minister, but in terms of a society that we think of as incredibly sexist, here we have a woman Prime Minister who was well respected, in part because of this tradition of certain women who Hindus very deeply respect, who break out of this kind of woman's role. And so it's expected that some people will violate these social norms. If we remember when we talked about the divine feminine last class, when we were speaking specifically about gods and goddesses, it is stereotypical, but it breaks some of our assumed stereotypes for what the role of a woman is. For example, in Western society, men are usually considered the active principle and women are the passive principle. But in the Hindu gods, women are the active principle And the males are the passive principle, and it is, although the males are the celestial heavenly, the female is earthly, it is assumed that the male deity is powerless without his wife, because she gives to him his active principle and brings him to life. Without her, he would be dead. We get this idea: Shiva without shukti is a corpse. The male needs the feminine to be alive in Hindu society in terms of the divine. The women is an active principle. And so this does filter down into the way they view human male and female relationships. The man is the passive principle, the woman is the active principle, but that active principle must be controlled by the passive male principle, or it runs amok, which is why we have no masculine deities without wives, because they need that power from their wives, but we do have female deities without the husband, and they generally run amok. We can see that same concept in the theology, which we talked about last time, written in the Laws of Manu, that idea that the woman isn't fit for independence. That statement is reflected, that belief in that statement is reflected in the myths they tell about their gods. We have independent female gods, but they are not the sort of person you want to hang out with, right? They're problematic and dangerous. So another manifestation of this is in ritual. Women must be honored and adorned, says the Law of Manu. Where women are revered, the gods rejoice, but where they are not, no sacred rite bears fruit. So this idea is that women actually have to be present for Vedic rituals to be efficacious. And if the woman isn't there, the active principle is missing and the Vedic ritual does not succeed. Although she takes no, I don't want to say active role, she takes no spoken sort of physical role in the ritual, but her presence is required to make the ritual work, much like the female goddesses are required for the male gods to function. Widows are where things are especially problematic for Hindu women. The other one, I think, actually, is when they first become a member of the householder. It's normal for men to stay in the families, in non-nuclear, they're extended families. So the men will stay with their mothers, and marriages are often arranged. So when a woman is first married, she will show up in a new home, often surrounded by strangers, with a mother-in-law who is kind of in charge of her, and the relationship between the woman and her mother-in-law is something that is often written about, and you'll see it in sort of TV shows, because it is stereotypically a challenging relationship, to say the least. And so that's one of the problem moments for women often. The other is widows, and widowhood is common, particularly because women tend to live longer than men naturally, but women tend to, in Hindu society, marry at a younger age than men, because men have to finish their finish their student stage before they enter the householder stage. Women enter the householder stage when they begin to menstruate. And so the women are younger by a few years than the men, and so widowhood tends to be common. But remarriage is generally forbidden, or at least frowned upon, especially since the woman is considered unlucky. And so you don't want to take that unluck upon yourself. In fact, in really traditional places, she wears a white sari, where white is the color of mourning. For us, it's black. For them, it's white. And sometimes they will shave their heads to intentionally be unattractive to males so that there's no temptation for remarriage. They have bad karma and they're unlucky. And in the most extreme cases, in older Hindu traditions, women were sometimes burned with their husband in sati, which is this principle of going with. So the woman would presumably willingly jump on the pyre and be immolated with her husband's corpse rather than become a widow. There is question about exactly how willing some of these widows were. Some of them may have been because widowhood was incredibly traumatic for them. They were often in poverty, they were not cared for, they were cast out, sometimes not taken care of. Sometimes people would take them to a certain city known for its widows and abandon them. And so facing that, some of them might have preferred death over that. But in other instances, they may have been forced to do this. It's not clear even now how common it ever was, but it happened. It was outlawed in relatively recent times. Relatively. We're several hundred years ago, but relatively recent times it was outlawed. So, this is a view of Hindu caste and gender relationships. And that, together with the ritual and doctrinal stuff we have discussed to date, sets the stage for Hinduism's tradition. Now what we want to do is discuss how Hinduism reacts when that tradition is placed in conversation with the other. Through the Islamic conquest and the British occupation, we'll talk about how they reacted to those changes, how Hinduism adapted to them, how it changed, how the roles of women began to change, etc. And so that's what we're going to talk about next. I do want to take a very brief break, and there are treats for those who are here physically. There are treats out in the fellowship hall. And if we can come back in about 5 minutes and start again, and we'll do this next bit. Thank you.